Welcome to Legalese. My name's Christopher Lilly. I'm your host. Legalese is a half-hour presentation of the Northern Middlesex Bar Association. We endeavor to bring you legal topics of interest to the community. I'm joined today by attorney Diana Mueller. She is an attorney with the firm of Hyde, and Associates in Shirley. Diana, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Today's program, the title of today's program is Parental Alienation. And we're looking at scenarios where particularly, well, this is in the family court, where particularly in instances of custody, visitation, where parents, certainly in that scenario, don't get along. You see frequently that there's a disparagement of one parent by another, or vice versa, or together against one another, and you see the child in the middle of that. That's something that's attempted to be discouraged through the courts and through attorneys, but sometimes it rises to an even greater extent to what's called parental alienation, or as some professionals have dubbed it, parental alienation syndrome.
That's right.
Diana, can you describe what is parental alienation and what is the concept of parental alienation syndrome all about?
Parental alienation is the situation where one parent is intentionally alienating the child from the other parent, and the child then is participating in that alienation, sort of going along with it and developing certain feelings against their other parent that they normally had a loving relationship with. And this almost always takes place in the context of a difficult, high conflict custody situation, or even arguing over visitation.
How does that parent bring that child on board to act in such a way?
Well, one of the ways they do that is sort of a relentless campaign of negative thoughts and characteristics of the other parent. This happens most easily when it's the custodial parent who is doing this behavior, so the child is really spending most of their time with that parent. One way to describe it would be a child's campaign of denigration against a parent without justification. This isn't a situation where a child is naturally estranged from a parent who has been abusive in the past, or maybe abandoned them and then attempted to come back, or where it's just been a really difficult, rocky relationship. Mm-hmm. This is a child who is alienated from a parent with no justification that's been found. Okay. So that's the difference between something that you could say, well, that makes sense to me that you don't want to spend time with him. But in this case, it would be really no rational reason, not rooted in reality. That's one of the most important differences. So it'd be a combination of the parent almost brainwashing the child and the child's willful contribution to the vilification of the other parent.
So what are some of the parental behaviors that might contribute to that?
Well, some of the things that all add up. Now, I'm going to read or say a few behavioral signs. Some of these things are present in almost all custody and visitation cases. When it rises to the level of parental alienation, when the child truly is becoming alienated from the other parent. Okay. So for example, some of these lists of bad behaviors would be...
I'm sorry, these are behaviors
of the parent,
that the child exhibits, or that the parent...
That the parent would be exhibiting as ways to alienate the child from the other parent. So for example, we have restricting access to information about the child. So most parents, certainly in Massachusetts, share legal custody. Each party is entitled to full information about the medical condition and school situation with the child. The custodial parent could start restricting that access to the non-custodial parent. They could interfere or refuse phone contact with the other parent. They could start saying negative things about the other parent to the child, whether subtly or not so subtly. They could start saying negative things about the other parent's job, career, lifestyle, girlfriend, living situation. All of those unkind, cutting remarks the child is taking in. They could encourage conflict between the other parent and the child instead of trying to facilitate a conflict-free relationship. So when the children typically have complaints about parents, that's perfectly normal. Instead of saying, oh, listening, but saying, well, I understand you're upset, doesn't seem that big of a deal. Instead, you encourage them to turn it into...
To make it that big
Exactly,
big a deal.
Exactly.
This is all behavior that the court discourages.
The court certainly does discourage it. And some of this, like I said, is present in every relationship, even if you're not getting a divorce. Kids will be kids, but this is more the parent deliberately doing this pattern of behaviors with the child with the intent of alienating. You could use...
Manipulating the child.
Manipulating, exactly. Some even say brainwashing. You could use the child to relay messages to the other parent that are hostile or inappropriate. You could blame the other parent for financial or emotional problems that you're having. You could suggest, this is a big one and this happens a lot, you could suggest the child is not safe when they go visit the other parent with no rational reason behind it. In other words, the child's leaving for visitation with the other parent. You say, are you sure you're going to be okay? Call me if you get worried about anything. I'm here. I'll never leave you. Just kind of winding them up when there's really no reason that the child wouldn't be safe with the other parent.
Passive aggressiveness.
It's very passive aggressive, exactly. Also, one thing that's highly inappropriate, and I know this is in a lot of separation agreements anyway as a big no-no, talking about the divorce with the child.
Right.
That's one of this big picture of alienation. Unfortunately, it also takes place in a lot of non-alienation cases. Sure. As lawyers, I know we always discourage our clients from doing that. Don't talk about the litigation. These parents will tell them every detail. Your father dragged me into court and it's costing us this much money. The kids have there's never a reason to involve them in anything that's going on with the court proceedings. Also, a big one, obviously, is interfering with visitation, scheduling birthday parties, activities, and events when there's supposed to be visitation with the other parent. The phone dies. Sorry, I knew you were supposed to call. My battery was dead. We were out. They were outside. They didn't want to come in. The TV was on. There's a million ways to interfere with the other parent's parenting time. All of that is part of the alienation that a parent, the alienating behavior that a parent can exhibit.
Okay. What are some of the signs that you might see exhibited in a child who has been now the subject of that alienating behavior?
Well, what the main signs would be that this is not just an angry child, not just a child upset about the divorce, which is very normal, that this is an alienated child. The main thing would be an irrational hatred or loathing of the other parent, rooted not rooted in reality. There's no history of abuse. They had a loving relationship previously, and there's no real reason why the child should feel so hostile towards that other parent. They also will come up with absurd excuses as to why they hate the other parent. For example, they could say, she forgot to give me my lunch money. I hate her. How could she do that to me? An extreme reaction to something that happens in every parent-child relationship.
And you can sense or see that has roots elsewhere.
Yes.
from the other, perhaps, alienating
parent. You would think
parent.
so, yes. And also the hatred is absolute. Most children they at least are ambivalent. One day they love you, the next day not so much. They, things change. They may have mixed feelings about a parent who's left the house, but this is an absolute hatred, 100%. The child may also states what they call independent thinking. The child very clearly tells whoever asks, and this is usually once professionals have gotten involved, they will say unequivocally, this is all my idea. I do not want to see my other parent. Let's say in this case, it's a mother alienating a father. The child could say, I do not want to see my father. It has nothing to do with my mom. It's my thoughts, my ideas. I've arrived to this conclusion by myself.
Okay.
So these children can clearly articulate that they do not want to see their parent, and they are protecting the parent they're living with.
So you're suggesting that they're advancing that as a defense, or to try to cut off a defense.
That's right.
Hey, look, this is all coming from me.
That's right.
My mom or my dad or whoever the alienating parent is not the one who's putting these words in my mouth.
That's absolutely right.
But that's in fact what's happening.
That's right.
Okay.
And also one striking behavioral characteristic of children who are alienated from their other parent is they have absolutely no guilt or remorse about how cruel they are to the other parent, about the hurt feelings of the other parent, about anything they have to say. There's no guilt, no remorse. They feel 100% justified in everything that they're saying. They also would be a complete support and identification with the parent they're living with. There's an unhealthy dependence often, which the alienating parent is fostering in the child, making the child feel that they can't really live without them, making the child feel that without them, something terrible could happen. That's distinctive of both the alienating parent and the alienated child feeling like they really can't function without that parent. There's also an odd situation which they call repeating borrowed scenarios. This is what experts call this behavior. In this instance, the child will talk about things in the past that they are saying the bad parent that they don't want to see has done to them or said in the house, things that child could never really have known about or seen or witnessed.
Such as?
Well, for example, the child could say, well, when my mommy was pregnant with me, my dad left for 3 months and she didn't know where he was. Obviously, a child would have no idea that that actually happened unless they were told by the alienating parent. Often, this is not true. Even and so that's a situation, but the child has no one to check that story against. It's the alienating parent and the child alone, and she's controlling the narrative of the history of their family.
Now, we've referred to this as parental alienation. You and I spoke about parental alienation syndrome as a label that may not be appropriate.
That's right.
Syndrome, it seems to be the label that's tossed around sometimes, and it seems to have some roots in perhaps a mental health issue. Why would that be inappropriate, referring to it as a syndrome?
Well, a syndrome, it has a very particular diagnostic definition, and there's controversy whether this collection of behaviors rises to that level. According to the American Psychiatric Association, they don't recognize it as an official diagnosis. They don't call it a mental health problem because it's not a mental health disorder that exists within one person. They call it a relationship issue because it requires two people. It requires the alienating parent and the child who's being alienated. That being said, there's still, this collection of behaviors is something that courts don't, discourage, and you can still talk about it in court or in terms of behavior that needs to be ended and remedies for this behavior.
So, how do the courts deal with these behaviors? What are some of the remedies that that come into play, and what are courts doing with these?
Well,
With these alienating behaviors.
So what typically happens is there's been a parenting plan or a separation agreement in place which dictates custody. Things start to fall apart. The parent that's being alienated, sometimes called the targeted parent, in this scenario doesn't have primary custody, but they have visitation. Suddenly the child is resisting visitation. So in Massachusetts, like many other states, the parent may find relief by going into the probate court and asking for a modification.
Okay.
The modification of a child visitation or custody agreement requires a change in material circumstance and the best interests of the child. So the change in circumstance could be this alienating behavior. Typically, a judge will allow an evidentiary hearing. The targeted parent can bring in evidence around alienation. Often you have a GAL appointed, or you do a custody evaluation, and then the judge can determine what the best interest of the child will be if they do find that material change. Now, there has been cases in the Massachusetts probate courts quite recently where they literally changed the primary custodial parent from one to the other as a direct result of alienation. They don't necessarily call it parental alienation syndrome. You don't have to get hung up on the title of this collection of behaviors. The most important thing to remember is that judges have recognized that this is a serious, almost rising to the level of abuse, and they will change custody if it comes to that. That's not necessarily the ideal solution. Every family's different. Perhaps the targeted parent who's being alienated isn't the ideal full-time custodial parent. Perhaps changing custody would be too disruptive, too scary. Experts call it, it's wrenching and abrupt. That's not always the ideal outcome either. You don't want to destroy the child's relationship with either parent. The goal isn't to undermine the relationship with the alienating parent. The goal is to reunify with the alienated parent.
So what are the better ways of dealing with that rather than removal from one parent and custody with the other?
Well, the gold standard, if you will, would be something called therapeutic intervention.
Okay.
Now, this is something that requires an incredible amount of time and resources and commitment from everyone, including the parties' attorneys, the judge involved, any GAL or therapist involved, a parenting coordinator. So as you hear me listing all these people, a therapeutic intervention takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money.
Okay.
And unfortunately, in a lot of probate cases, one party or both parties simply do not have the money to finance something like this. So either one parent gives up, or the parties go pro se, and then things just take a lot longer. In the meantime, the thing to remember in these cases is the clock is always ticking.
Right.
The sooner you can do any kind of intervention in an alienation case, the better. The older the children get, the more difficult it is to undo any damage. In fact, I've read studies where they've interviewed adult children, children who are now adults who were alienated in the context of their parents' divorce, and the children report negative outcomes, let's say, including obviously blows to their self-esteem, depression, and all of the behaviors that accompany that confusion and guilt that they felt, such as addiction and difficulty having healthy relationships as adults. And alienated parents should be aware that the children, when they realize what they've undergone as adults looking back on their childhood, they often will resent the alienated parent and feel very hostile towards that parent now.
Toward the parent that was doing the alienation?
Yes. Yes.
So at what point are these children recognizing that this is what I've gone through and that this is...
Some never do. It depends on These kids were in therapy for years. Sometimes it just takes the targeted parent to be patient and to hang in there and to try to maintain a relationship with their child, no matter how little feedback they're getting.
So that's a good point. What should a targeted parent do if they feel that they're in that situation where they're being alienated? What are the best recommendations for that parent?
What I would advise, first of all, is before you even get to drafting a parenting agreement with the other party, you should really do a gut check on whether any alienation is going on, even as you speak. Excuse me. So the best way to deal with parental alienation is to prevent it from happening. And as lawyers, you can also look out for the symptoms that we talked about, or the collection of behaviors, and try to end it before it really begins.
Right.
Once you have your custody agreement in place and your parenting plan and things are kind of going along, and then suddenly you realize this is not working out, my son or daughter doesn't want to see me, I don't understand, and you start to get an idea of what's going on, really you should keep a diary, keep a log of all of the missed visits, the visits that have been interfered with, the phone calls that didn't happen, all of those things that are leading up to you having less and less contact with your child. Meticulously log that, because when you need to go into court, you need to be able to paint a picture for the judge of the bad behavior. The other thing is, no matter how, and this is very painful, the main thing for the targeted parent to keep in mind is they need to be the better person. They need to take the high road. I know it's easier said than done. It's not fair.
It's easier to react and
it's easy
want to push back.
That's right. And you're being painted as a monster. You're being characterized in a very negative light. But you have to rise above it. You have to not get down and fight on those terms. You shouldn't exhibit any alienating behaviors of your own. You shouldn't disparage the parent to your child. You shouldn't badmouth them. You shouldn't talk about the divorce, just like all those other behaviors we talked about. You shouldn't engage in that. Also, you should maintain contact no matter what. Even if every third visit your child doesn't show up, you have to show up on that fourth visit. You have to keep contact. The child has to know that no matter what, I want to see you. I'm going to make sure that I see you. I'm going to keep calling you. Even if you don't answer your phone, I'm going to keep calling you. I'm going to email you. I'm going to send you gifts, even if you don't thank me or respond.
Now there's a caveat to all of this, to the parental alienation. And a parental alienation claim, defense, can also be used as a weapon sometimes in cases such as this, correct?
That's right. And that's something that really has to be, the main definition of parental alienation is that the child is being alienated from the other parent with no rational reason. So obviously, as a lawyer, as a practitioner, you would look at the situation and see, is there a reason why this child does not want to see my client? What is going on? Was there DCFS reports? Is there a history of police involvement? Is there abuse? What was the relationship like prior to the dissolution of the marriage? All of those things can be looked at. If there's no evidence of any abuse and it was a normal, healthy relationship prior to the divorce, you might have alienation on your hands. Okay.
All right. Well, I thank you for talking with us about this topic. It's certainly an interesting topic, and as an attorney who specializes in the area, what might you recommend to a client who's dealing with these issues?
I would advise them to take the high road, keep logs, prepare yourself emotionally, gather your resources Look for therapists who specialize in family reunification and alienation. Be prepared to educate the courts, educate those therapists, do your own research, keep in touch with your child, and think positive and think of the ultimate goal of normalizing the relationship with your child.
Now, you've provided us with I think a very long website address, which I think we're scrolling on the screen at some point, that provides a service for people that can read up a little bit more about this.
That's
Where
right.
does that? What is that website?
That website is actually a family law resource, so that comes at it from an attorney perspective, which is quite helpful. There's also a lot of resources that will guide you in a therapeutic approach, because this really is about parents being educated on how to talk to their children when you find yourself in this situation, how not to alienate, how not to make the situation worse for yourself and your child, and how to sort of, maneuver through this.
Okay. Well, Diana Mueller, I want to thank you again for joining us. I think this has been a very interesting topic, very interesting show, and I thank you for bringing this to our attention. And I will say to our audience, obviously anything we say here is for general information purposes. Anything that you hear in tonight's show should not be taken as advice in a particular case. Every case is fact specific, and you should bring those cases and bring your questions to local counsel, such as Diana, who can talk with you and determine what your situation is, and that's what local counsel is for, is to meet with you and to give you advice based on your particular set of facts. Once again, I want to thank you all for staying tuned. We will be bringing you these informational programs on a regular basis. And on behalf of Diana Mueller, I'm Christopher Lilly. Thank you.